BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of Astro Psych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, another Ripper Wednesday. Welcome to the show. On Wednesdays, I've been talking to you guys about the Jack the Ripper suspects, and recently on the channel, I did an episode about Sir William Gull, and that easily turned into a discussion on a theory using multiple participants in the Jack the Ripper case that was mostly promulgated by Stephen Knight, author of The Final Solution. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who operated in 1888 in England, but some people believe that there were multiple participants involved, and some people think that the murders should be attributed to a single killer. And one of the participants in Stephen Knight's theory was Walter Sickert, and I was discussing his involvement in that one, and I invite you to listen to that episode if you haven't heard it yet, so you can hear the multiple killers theory. But one person who thinks that Walter Sickert should be viewed as the sole Jack the Ripper suspect or the single perpetrator in the case is the crime novelist Patricia Cornwell, and in this episode I'm mostly going to be responding to the documentary that she participated in called Stalking the Ripper, and talking about her Ripper suspect Walter Sickert. But before we truly begin, I would like to remind you guys that you can hit the like button and subscribe. Those are some great ways that help out the channel, and you can also go through some of the links in the description box, including one for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. Now, Walter Sickert is someone who is absolutely more famous for his artwork and his paintings as opposed to being a Ripper suspect, and we do see this from time to time. I mean, one suspect that I've never talked about on this channel is Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland, as well as also being a poet. He is even a Jack the Ripper suspect, but one suspect that I have discussed with you guys was Francis Thompson, and he is also more famous for his poetry as opposed to being a Ripper suspect. So we're seeing people from a lot of different backgrounds. You'll see people from just the absolute bottom levels of poverty. You'll see people who are aristocrats, or, as I said, I was talking about Sir William Gull, who was the British royal physician, and then you also have people who may not have even existed, such as Dr. Alexander Pedichenko, who might have just been a fictitious creation from somebody years later, even in the 20th century. So all types of theories exist in the Ripper case, and when I was watching the documentary Stalking the Ripper, Patricia Cornwell said that she is a crime novelist, and one thing that she likes to do with her novels is to investigate different types of law enforcement and research a branch of law enforcement that she hasn't truly explored before, and one of them was Scotland Yard. And as she was planning to write a novel involving someone interacting with Scotland Yard, she got on the story of Jack the Ripper, and she said that she was very moved by how the victims were women, and they were not only murdered but also mutilated, but specifically it was the murder of Mary Kelly that pulled her into the world of Jack the Ripper. And I've said to you guys that I have not wanted to share the photos of the mutilated women on this channel during these Ripper Wednesday episodes, and I'm still not going to do that, but they did this very frequently in the documentary Stalking the Ripper, which you can watch on YouTube for free, and they showed the Mary Kelly crime scene, and I mean, her body was not only mutilated, but her face was almost completely, all the facial features were completely removed and mutilated. Her murder body was cut up, and one detail that I've overlooked was her intestines were actually pulled out and left on a nightstand table next to where the crime scene took place. The murder of Mary Kelly as Jack the Ripper's only crime that took place indoors, and some people believe that because it was the final crime, the Ripper wanted to commit a murder indoors because he did not want to be interrupted, such as perhaps with the murder of Liz Stride and maybe even with the murder of Catherine Eddowes, who were the third and fourth victims, respectively. And I've told you guys in the past, I'm also going to be doing a future book discussion on the book The Seduction of Mary Kelly by William Perring, because I think a lot of us have this experience that Patricia Cornwell was talking about where you just simply want to have a stronger connection with the women in the Ripper case, particularly Mary Kelly, because she was so viciously attacked and how her body was so viciously destroyed, and you just simply do not want to accept that she was just a woman who got cut up by Jack the Ripper. You want to experience something more, and that's what Patricia Cornwell said that her ambition was in exploring the Ripper case, was she wanted to give justice to the women, bring closure to the case, and she believes that she has identified her suspect. She believes that she has identified Jack the Ripper with her suspect Walter Sickert. And if you were to Google Walter Sickert, you will see that he is listed as a German-born painter, but his ancestry was of Danish and English heritage, and he came to England at a very early age. He would have been 28 years old at the time of the murder, and at the time of the murders, actually, in 1888. So that's not completely unreasonable, but I began to wonder, okay, this guy's a painter. I mean, did he have any understanding of the human body? I mean, think about what we've just said about how there are these vicious mutilations. And one point that I've talked to you guys about very frequently on these Ripper Wednesday episodes is, with the fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes, her kidney was cut out. And it's possible that her kidney was cut in half, and half of it was mailed in with Jack the Ripper's From Hell letter, which I believe has the highest likelihood of being an authentic communication from the killer, although I'm not convinced of that 100%, but it has the highest likelihood. And I was wondering, like, wouldn't somebody need anatomical knowledge or an understanding of the human body or just some type of medical experience to remove a kidney from another person? And Patricia Cornwell did an experiment in the documentary Stalking the Ripper to try and demonstrate this, and it's purely done by her. I mean, she's doing it herself. She's putting on clothing that would have been similar to what the victim would have been wearing, and she had actually pieces of meat. She didn't say where it came from. I can only guess that it was from a pig, because pigs are often used in medical simulations, but she showed that Catherine Eddowes would have allegedly been wearing 6 layers of clothes on the night of her murder, and then the person would cut with a knife, then just tear the clothes, and Catherine Eddowes would have already been strangled, mind you, and then she pointed out that you would not need an enormous amount of medical knowledge to remove the kidney, because the person is just going to stick the knife in and actually remove the kidney with their hands, because it's just kind of straight cutting motions, and then the person is just going to be separating the woman's flesh, as disgusting as that sounds, and that the kidney could have been removed by hand. That's how she thinks that Walter Sickert did this. But why would Walter Sickert be a Jack the Ripper suspect in the first place? Some of the big pieces of evidence that she has pointed to are his paintings, his artwork, and just the dark nature of his creations. Notably, I mean, the absolute most notable clue is that he did a painting called Jack the Ripper's Bedroom, which I will be sharing as the images go by. And she also points out that he did 2 other paintings about the Camden Town murder, which is a possible Jack the Ripper crime, even though it happened in the 20th century in 1907. And this is one that I was not familiar with, but so I'm going to read you guys a very basic definition. But back in, it's about 2 years ago actually, I did an episode for the Horizon Eye Productions channel called The World of the Zodiac Killer, 50 Years of Terror, and I was talking about how there is this world of true crime stories that is just connected to the Zodiac Killer. All types of true crime cases have a possible Zodiac Killer connection, and I attempted to make a list of them, and I'm almost certainly going to have to do that for the Jack the Ripper case, because there are so many true crime stories that have been connected to Jack the Ripper. I mean, I'll be talking to you about the Camden Town murder in a second, but I mean, even the assassination of President Lincoln has a connection through the suspect Francis Tumblety, and not to mention other serial killers like Thomas Neal Cream, who was the Lambeth poisoner who operated in North America and in England. And then you have the Midnight Assassin, who operated a little bit earlier than Jack the Ripper, 1884 and 1885. And the suspect that gets linked to both of the crime stories is James Maybrick. But to talk about the Camden Town murder, I'm just going to provide the most basic Wikipedia-style introduction, and that is, the Camden Town murder was a murder which took place in Camden Town, London in 1907. Robert Wood, an artist, also an artist like Walter Sickert, was tried for the murder of prostitute Emily Dimmock and acquitted after a defense by Edward Marshall. On September 11th of 1907, Emily Elizabeth Dimmock, who was also known as Phyllis, was a part-time prostitute and in a relationship with Bertram Shaw, a railwayman, and she was murdered in her home at Agar Grove, which was then called 29 St. Paul's Road in Camden, and having gone there from the Eagle, which was a public house or a pub on Royal College Street, her attacker had slit her throat while she was asleep and then left in the morning. On the 12th, Shaw returned home to the evening to find his room locked. He borrowed a key from a neighbor and upon entering found Phyllis, also known as Emily, lying naked on the bed, and her throat had been cut from ear to ear. It was a savage but skillful attack from the nature of the wound. Nothing much had been taken from the flat, and the motive was a mystery. The case quickly became a sensation. After initial difficulty, the police investigation led by Inspector Neal centered on Robert Wood, an artist, and a former girlfriend of Wood's, Ruby Young, recognized his handwriting on a postcard found in Dimmock's room, which had been published in many newspapers. She mentioned the similarity of the handwriting to a friend who worked in Fleet Street. Wood was put on trial for the murder, during which Marshall Hall displayed the kind of effective and dramatic cross-examination for which he was known. Marshall Hall was convinced of Wood's innocence and also the fallibility of the prosecution's case. The judge, Mr. Justice Grantham, departed from the pro-conviction stance and he was expected to take, mid-summing up, and made it clear that he thought the jury should acquit. They did, after retiring for 15 minutes between 7:45 and 8 o'clock. The artist, Walter Sickert, adopted the phrase "the Camden Town murder" for a series of etchings, paintings, and drawings in 1908 and 1909, and that would have been roughly 1 year after the murder took place, 1 year, 2 years after the murder took place. In each of the subjects or a clothed man and a nude woman. It was dramatized in an episode of the radio crime anthology series The Black Museum in 1952, starring Orson Welles, and a television series called Killer in Close-Up, dramatized by George F. Kerr, featured the case in the episode The Robert Wood Trial. The episode was produced by Sydney television station ABN2 and broadcast on September 4th, 1957, more than 30 years later. The court case was featured in an episode of the BBC series Shadow of the Noose, with Jonathan Hyde as Marshall and Peter Capaldi as Wood. And that is, of course, referring to Robert Wood. I absolutely love Peter Capaldi, by the way. A lot of people know him because of Doctor Who, but I was just watching him in an episode of Prime Suspect. It's one of the older ones, but I found it on YouTube. He was playing a cross-dresser, for lack of a better term. He's playing this cross-dresser named Vera, and he gave an amazingly dramatic performance. I also watched him on The Thick of It, In the Loop, and the TV show Skins. He even had a minor role in that. But I'm just going to digress from that particular subject and focus more on this aspect of Walter Sickert being responsible for the Camden Town murder. Now, why does Patricia Cornwell think that he should be the suspect in that case? Number one, she does not accept the result that Jack the Ripper's crimes just stopped. I mean, you have the Autumn of Terror in 1888, and these women are murdered from August 31st to November 9th. But she just asked the question openly in the documentary Stalking the Ripper. Why did the crimes just stop, and why do people have to accept that the Ripper did not commit any more homicides when murders were taking place? And it could even go all the way up to 1907. With the Camden Town murder, and why does it have to be so cut off? I mean, we get this in the Zodiac Killer mystery too. People just simply think, okay, this person just changed the way that he was committing crimes because he did not want to get caught. And Walter Sickert does have a direct connection to Camden Town, and not only that, he made multiple paintings, drawings, and sketches, as you heard, of places in Camden Town, but the biggest reason why Patricia Cornwell thinks that Walter Sickert should be also guilty of the Camden Town murder is the aspect of cutting the woman's throat from ear to ear, this type of throat slitting, which is also found in the Ripper case, and she believes that Walter Sickert left clues in his paintings about how there's this woman who is wearing a string of pearls around her neck in a very odd way, and she believes that that is meant to represent his fascination with slitting the throat, or it's something that is just focusing in on the throat. It's like leaving a clue in a particular way that he is a murderer and he slit the throats of his victims. Now, I have to admit, though, I follow that type of narrative. I follow it in terms that I can comprehend what she's saying, but claims like that are so abstract that, well, how do you truly know that that's what this painter was thinking about when he created the painting? And how do you truly know what Jack the Ripper was thinking when he committed the murders? So let's look at some harder pieces of evidence that we can challenge. Number one, Patricia Cornwell believes that Jack the Ripper committed the crimes because he was impotent or had some type of sexual dysfunction, and that created a hatred of women. And they even discussed this in Stalking the Ripper, saying that the murder of Mary Kelly was so extremely vicious because this person had a deep hatred of women. Now, did the person actually know Mary Kelly? It's possible, and that's why her body was so viciously mutilated. That could very well be true, but there's also the possibility that it's just animosity toward women. They said it's not uncommon for intense mutilations to happen to somebody that the killer did not personally know. I mean, it's also not impossible, and it's not beyond the scope of reason. So Walter Sickert may have been impotent, and he could have had this type of just hatred of women, but also hatred of himself, feeling inferior, and just wanting to unleash his destructive tendencies because of a type of sexual dysfunction, which could have stemmed from a series of operations that he had as a kid, which were done to his genital area, for lack of a better term. But the whole time that I was watching that, I was just curious about one thing that I've also read about Walter Sickert in the past, and that was, well, was he truly impotent? I mean, if you were to just get on his Wikipedia page, you'll see that he was married 3 times, and they also state that he had affairs, and it's possible that he even fathered a child out of wedlock. Possible. So that doesn't mean that Patricia Cornwell is completely wrong. But instead, I was like, well, how do we truly know that this guy was impotent and he had this type of sexual dysfunction, and he had this type of sexual inadequacy? I mean, the last time he was married was in 1926, just going off of memory, so that was one point that didn't stand up too well with me. But if you do watch Stalking the Ripper, you will see that there is a lot of scientific investigation. There is a lot of DNA analysis. There is a lot of forensic examinations that are going on. And because it's television, or because it's a documentary film, they're always giving the same result for everything. Well, it could be this, or it could be that. We can't definitively say that Walter Sickert was Jack the Ripper, but we also can't definitively eliminate him. And it's just going on and on and on. Now, I did share something with you guys in the most previous episode about Walter Sickert and Sir William Gull and the Royal Conspiracy. And what I shared was that there was an unconfirmed Jack the Ripper communication called the Openshaw letter, which they claimed they were able to extract mitochondrial DNA from. Mitochondrial DNA is not the same as nuclear DNA. Mitochondrial DNA would have been roughly, it could be found in as many as 1 to 10% of the population, and they say that there's this DNA match. Now, they said that they have a DNA match with Walter Sickert, and I said I don't even care about that because I don't think the Openshaw letter was authentic, absolutely not. But they had to challenge me with something. They provided a very strong challenge to that claim in Stalking the Ripper, and that is that the Openshaw letters paper is written on a stationery that is very similar to what Walter Sickert used for his own personal stationery, and it even has an almost identical watermark. And they showed this up on the screen that, it's like very similar. Now, this is a paper that could have been commonly used by people. They totally admit that. But I even had to consider, all right, maybe I was wrong about the Openshaw letter. I'm not completely backing down from my original claims because you're going to have to do a lot more than just say there's a watermark that's found on a commonly sold stationery. But I definitely will now give more leeway or have a stronger consideration about the Openshaw letter being authentic. And I mean, because let's get to the heart of the issue. Walter Sickert is not a terrible Jack the Ripper suspect. he is also not the best. He's really in the middle in terms of likelihood. And think of all the things that we've said here, so many points about Walter Sickert could just simply be explained by the fact that he had morbid curiosity, making paintings Jack the Ripper's bedroom, the Camden Town murder, and he perhaps lived in these areas where these murders took place, and there were lots of discussions about the murders. They were mentioned in the newspapers. People also shared gossip very, very strongly back in those days. I mean, like, even going forward in the 20th century into the New Orleans Axeman story, from the early attacks, like, that are known as the Cleaver attacks in the early part of, like, the 1910s, for lack of a better term. They believe that one of the ways that the stories shared were so frequently were by gossip and word of mouth, and people just spreading the news throughout the neighborhood. Oh my gosh, you don't believe what just happened down the street. He could have learned about this, and making a painting about Jack the Ripper's bedroom does not make him Jack the Ripper. Making a painting or series of paintings about the Camden Town murder does not mean that he committed the Camden Town murder. And I know what Patricia Cornwell was trying to do by linking the Camden Town murder to Jack the Ripper, thinking that this is an older, tired Jack the Ripper. I mean, 1907, nearly 20 years would have gone by since the Whitechapel murders of 1888. So this is almost just like a resurgence of Jack the Ripper, a rebirth, so to speak. I completely follow what she's saying, and let's not kid ourselves. Patricia Cornwell must be somewhat of an intelligent person to have this type of success that she's achieved. And if you do watch Stalking the Ripper, they have all types of images of her walking on the beach and flying in a private jet and just experiencing all of these multi-million-dollar lifestyle features. Okay, I mean, I don't think that she is a dimwit. No, not at all. But that being said, just because you can lay out a set of ideas in a sequence that makes sense to you, or even makes sense to somebody in the audience, it does not mean that that suspect is true. I mean, we were just talking about this on Zodiac Monday with a video clip that I played from Ken Maines, who runs the channel Unsolved No More. He said, you can make anything fit. You can pick a suspect and make it fit. It doesn't mean that that person actually was the killer. And this all goes back to the concept of cherry picking to get a desired result. And I'm just seeing that over and over again with this Walter Sickert theory, because it's like, well, he has this painting where the woman is wearing the string of pearls around her neck, and that could be because it represents the slitting of the throat. Well, does it really? I mean, does it really? Or is that really the clue that he was trying to leave, that he slit the throats of women in 1888, and that's why there's this string of pearls? I mean, that's just like, it can fall into the category of even beyond cherry picking to get a desired result. Somebody is interpreting the evidence in a very specific way because that's what they're trying to achieve. But what do you think about anything that's been shared about Walter Sickert, and what do you think about the claim that the Ripper did not need to have medical knowledge or anatomical knowledge? And I mean, that is going to be something that I think we need to discuss very frequently. And if anything, if there's any takeaway from the documentary Stalking the Ripper, which once again you can watch on YouTube for free, it's actually in 6 parts, but like part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on, but you can watch the whole thing. That might have been her strongest claim. That's not about her suspect, Walter Sickert, but it's one of the strongest discussions on the reenactment and recreation of how the Ripper could have removed the kidney of Catherine Eddowes without even knowing that much about the body. I can follow that type of thinking again, and I mean, I can follow it in a more strong and more strong and an acceptable manner. But I'm also going to share something with you guys, because here on Black Box Online Radio, I rarely hold back what I genuinely think about the. What I want to share with you is, I just think that there are some stronger suspects than Walter Sickert, and I briefly mentioned Francis Thompson, who was not a painter but a poet, and I found that the explanations put forward by Richard Patterson, who is the author of the book Jack the Ripper: The Works of Francis Thompson, were absolutely more convincing than the ones about Walter Sickert, and he would be a stronger suspect in my opinion, because, I mean, he did have medical knowledge. He was a failed doctor. He was brilliant but an underachiever, an underperformer. He ended up working in a factory, more or less, that made medical instruments, and he was a quality control inspector for these medical instruments, and he just had so many other failed careers, like being a failed priest and so on. And you can hear my episode on Francis Thompson, and I still think that Joseph Barnett is a reasonable suspect as well, because he had the direct connection to Mary Kelly. He lived with her, and it's possible that he actually had a romantic relationship. And the whole concept of he was committing the Ripper crimes because of a type of, well, inability to get Mary Kelly to fall in love with him, so to speak, or not even fall in love. I doubt if anyone actually were to commit the murder in the theoretical sense, then that is just about domination, so to speak. But I think that that is a claim. We have to differentiate the theory involving Joseph Barnett versus what actually happened. But Joseph Barnett would have been somebody who was working in a fish market, and he's filleting fish all day. He was just someone who would have been very good with a knife. And Patricia Cornwall's claim about how the Ripper could have just slit open Catherine Eddowes and then kind of used very rough movements and actually removed the kidney with his hands would fall, would almost support a suspect like Joseph Barnett more strongly than a suspect like Walter Sickert. So, if you guys want to share some things about the other suspects on the channel, I mean, like, you can totally do so. If there's a Jack the Ripper suspect that you are curious about and you would like discussed here on Ripper Wednesday, you can put your idea in the comments section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there is always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram, and I will see you there for the bonus podcast. And that is really going to be coming out in the form of shorts and reels. They're going to be more short episodes that will be released on both Facebook and Instagram, as well as the YouTube Shorts page. And on Facebook and Instagram, they're going to be on the Reels pages, so lots of things to look forward to. And I'll see you over there for that bonus podcast indeed. Until next time.